And after that, the Senate will return to session this evening for a procedural vote on disapproving an increase in the debt limit, part of the debt agreement, before the recess. We take a live now to the House floor here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered today by our guest chaplain, Reverend Clerk Johnson from the First Southern Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas.
I'd be a delight if you would join me in prayer. Lord God, we begin our day by humbly thanking you for your love, from which comes the blessings of life. Among those blessings, none seem more important or more needed to this legislative body than the gift of wisdom. We pray that each member of this Congress will seek the wisdom that comes from you. We are thankful for the leaders who use that wisdom to discern direction and implement the right course of action to enrich the lives of the citizens they represent. And I pray for them personally. The demands are paid upon them, the heavy burdens, the responsibility, the lifestyle interruptions, that they will physically, mentally, and emotionally remain steadfast to the task. Lord, we collectively lift our nation to you, that it will be a blessing to you and to those to whom we are involved with throughout the world. It is in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentlelady from California, Ms. Chu.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Without objection, the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Jenkins, is recognized for 1 minute. Without objection.
Remarks. I am so pleased this morning to welcome a fellow Kansan to the halls of Congress. Pastor Clerk Johnson is here today serving as guest chaplain to the House of Representatives. And I have to say it was a nice start to the day with a prayer infused with a little Kansas spirit. Pastor Johnson joined the Topeka community in 1989 when he accepted the call to become senior pastor of the First Southern Baptist Church in Topeka, and over the last 20 years, Pastor Johnson has built a true family at his church, with members steadfastly working together for the greater glory of our Lord and Savior. Kansas and Topeka are so blessed to have Pastor Johnson in our community, and the House is especially blessed to have Pastor Johnson with us today. I want to thank him for his service and wish him well for many years to come. Thank you. I yield back.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to address the House in 1 minute as I extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, House Republicans today are seeking to empower parents through the Empowering Parents Through Quality Charter Schools Act. The charter schools are public schools created through a contract with an authorized agency or local school district. This bipartisan legislation encourages states to support the expansion and development of charter schools. It allows for successful charter school models to be duplicated. Finally, it accounts for an evaluation of the impact charter schools have on students, families, and communities. More importantly, it encourages the sharing of best practices between charter and traditional public schools. Charter schools enable parents to have a more active role in their children's education. They pave the way for teachers to introduce fresh teaching methods while providing a viable option for students to escape from underperforming schools. This legislation is important to the educational needs of our nation's families and children. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
American families are profoundly worried. Many have lost their jobs. They've seen college tuition rise and watched their nest egg shrink. Unemployment is stuck at 9.1%. You can feel the pain. That is why a jobs bill is so critical. And yet, after 9 months of the Republicans taking over the House, they haven't passed a single jobs bill. Instead, they voted 10 times against job creation plans. They passed bills that gut millions of American jobs. And Governor Perry even attacked one of the few programs still keeping Americans afloat, calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme, blaming seniors for defrauding younger generations. Americans need more than empty promises. Tonight we will hear a proposal from the President. Let's work together to finally provide real solutions that will put people back to work and give them hope for the future.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last month, I've had the privilege to travel across the 14th Congressional District in Illinois. I've met with hundreds of my constituents at town hall meetings, coffee shops, diners, and in their workplaces. Over and over, I heard the same concern about our economy and our nation. We talked about how to get our economy moving again, and many of my constituents are convinced that we must get government out of the way, cut spending, cut red tape, keep taxes low. They know, as I do, that government itself cannot create jobs. They know that the best thing we can do is to help our economy is to create a pro-growth environment, reasonable regulation, fiscal sanity, and a cleaner, fairer tax code. I'm pleased that that will be our agenda here in the House this fall, and I look forward to serving my constituents by giving our job creators the certainty they need to expand, hire, and get our economy moving again. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, tonight the President will try once again to restart this economy. But the problem is not with the President or his policies. It's here with the House majority, who will oppose whatever he proposes. They will say that we tried the stimulus and it didn't work, but one of the reasons why the economy is slowing down is that stimulus dollars are drying up. They will say that we need to cut corporate tax rates, but corporate after-tax profits are at an all-time high. They will say that we need to deregulate the financial markets, but it was that kind of deregulation that put us into this mess in the first place. What we need is the faith to invest in this country's future. There are $2.2 trillion of infrastructure projects that need to be funded. Every $1 billion that goes into this country's infrastructure creates 47,500 more jobs and, in fact, generates $6.2 billion of additional economic activity. That's what we need to do. That will work. That will make our country stronger, will reduce the deficit, and put people back to work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today in honor of the memory of the late Sergeant Darrell Curley of the Navajo Police Department, who after 26 years of dedicated service lost his life in the line of duty on June 25, 2011. Sergeant Curley was killed in the line of fire responding to a call in his community, Kaibito, where he lived with his wife Pauline and 3 children, Ariel, Bront, and Derek. Sergeant Curley was a dependable public servant and an outstanding family man whose smile is remembered warmly by those who knew him. He also was recently appointed to a position of leadership within his faith community as second counselor in the bishopric of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Kaibito. Sergeant Curley was a kind man who was always willing to do for others and dedicating his life to improving the safety and security of the people of the Navajo Reservation. where he was raised and lived his life. It is outstanding individuals like Sergeant Curley that have the experience and courage to serve and protect our communities, as well as put their lives in danger for the safety of others. My thoughts and prayers are with Sergeant Curley's family, the Navajo Nation, and the broader Northern Arizona law enforcement community for such an outstanding individual. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This summer I heard one message over and over as I visited my district. We need to create a jobs program to get our people back to work. I was sent to Washington to work with anybody and everybody who's willing to put aside the partisan bickering and get the job done for Americans. Yet we wasted a tremendous amount of time this summer fighting over debt ceiling and issues that had nothing to do with creating jobs in this country. Starting today, let's get back to work. I got to tell you, folks, I was also very offended when I was at an Akron Congress on Your Corner when a Marine held up a cap that said United States Marine Corps on the top, and it was made in China. I've got an amazing company right back in my district, New Era Cap, that could have made that. Let's get people back to work, working in America. Make it in America. Let's get the job done. Thank you very much.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While working in Florida during August, I hosted 2 small roundtables, business roundtables, because I wanted to hear from my constituents on how the federal government can best help the small business community. Their message was loud and clear. Washington needs to get out of the way so small businesses can innovate, grow, and create desperately needed jobs. Burdensome regulations, the crippling cost of federal health care reform, and uncertainty surrounding the tax code are holding businesses back from making crucial decisions. Jeff, a constituent who owns a moving company, told me, Gus, I have money in the bank. I'd love to do something with it, but I can't when everything is so uncertain. Reducing unnecessary regulations and simplifying the tax code would help provide the certainty that business owners like Jeff need to make the decisions that drive the economy forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise? To address the House for 1 minute. Without objection, the gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fear that in every assembly, members will obtain influence by noise, not sense, by meanness, not greatness, by contracted hearts, not large souls. Mr. Speaker, John Adams wrote those words to his wife over 200 years ago, but the same fear lives today. Congress is back in town, and all anyone wants to know is when, not if, we will tear each other apart. I think we are better than that. As we move into September and tonight's address, let's remember how John ended that letter to Abigail. There must be decency and respect and veneration introduced for persons of authority of every rank, or we are undone. In a popular government, wrote Adams, this is our only way. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The seasons may be changing, but our nation's jobs crisis is not. With unemployment still at 9.1% and no measurable job growth in August, I'm glad to hear that this administration is ready to find common ground with Republicans to help create jobs. But before he addresses the nation tonight, the President should take a close look at our plan for America's job creators and know that House Republicans have already paved the path to job growth for him. So far this year, House Republicans have passed more than a dozen bills that do exactly what countless employers around the country are asking of Washington. Get out of the way so that our private sector can begin creating jobs again. This fall, we'll continue to roll back job-killing regulations and rebuild long-term confidences for job creators. We all hope the President will join us in this effort. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Vermont rise?
To address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The scene to my right is a typical scene in Vermont. It's the result of the fury of Hurricane Irene. The damage to homeowners, to businesses, to the state infrastructure is immense. This scene inflicted itself on 47 districts represented by members of this House of Representatives. The fury of Irene was indiscriminate in who was on the receiving end of a very bad storm. That was an act of God. The relief will come as a result of an act of Congress. And Republicans represent Democrats in their districts. Democrats represent Republicans in our district. We have a mutual responsibility to work together to get the tools back to those first responders, to those municipalities, to those volunteer firefighters who are doing the very hard work in each and every one of our districts to recover from Hurricane Irene. Mr. Speaker, we had a meeting this morning of a coalition to fight for relief for Hurricane Irene. We're going to get the funds back to our first responders, to our municipalities and states, to our families so that they can get the job done. I thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Alabama rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning, a Jobs Now protest and chant reverberated through the Rayburn House Office building. Per a 2009 study by the Pew Hispanic Center, 7.8 million illegal aliens hold jobs in America. Mr. Speaker, there is a surefire way to create jobs now for American citizens. Evict all illegal aliens from America and immediately open up millions of jobs for American citizens. That also forces blue-collar wages up, helping American families afford and pursue the American dream. Unfortunately, the White House chases a different dream, a nightmare that pits unemployed Americans against illegal aliens in a competition for scarce jobs. The DREAM Act gives amnesty for millions of illegal aliens, thereby legitimizing illegal conduct and depriving American citizens of job opportunities. Mr. Speaker, Congress and the White House must create jobs now for American citizens. We must fight for American citizens, not for illegal aliens.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Connecticut is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this August I was home holding town hall meetings, meeting with chambers, senior centers. The message was the same. Congress should stop the bickering, get to work, and get some results. Coming back here, we've got a lot of work to do. We have a budget which is going to expire at the end of this month, transportation infrastructure which will expire, federal aviation, small business research and development, disaster relief, and oh, by the way, the post office is about to go bankrupt. Yet with all these to-do items, and 21 days left in this month, the leadership of this House has only scheduled 5 full working days. That is a schedule which would make Homer Simpson blush. Mr. Speaker, it is time for the leadership of this House to scrap that schedule, get us to work, get these issues done, create some certainty in this country and some confidence that Washington can get the job done, and stop the lackadaisical do-nothing schedule which is leaving this country totally without trust and confidence about whether or not we as a nation can address the challenges facing us. I yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the 11 victims of the shooting in Carson City, Nevada, including 5 of my fellow National Guardsmen. As a member of the Mississippi Army National Guard, I have the utmost respect for what these men and women do on a daily basis and the trials and tribulations that go along with being a citizen soldier. They risk danger and loss of life every time they put on the uniform. They should not have to face danger in their own backyards. Unfortunately, the sacrifices that many of these soldiers and their families make for our country go largely unnoticed by many Americans. I hope that my colleagues in the House will join me in commending the work our National Guard does every day, both here and overseas. I hope for a quick recovery for all those injured, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the members' families that were killed by this senseless act of violence. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Super Committee begins its work this week with the goal of setting a course toward fiscal stability. We absolutely need to reduce the debt and deficit, but we need to do it in a responsible and balanced manner that supports and rebuilds the middle class. Nobody is more patriotic and nobody knows more about sacrifice than brave Americans who served their nation in the military. A retired Navy pilot who flew 215 missions during his career wrote to my office to stress that every American should contribute to a solution, especially those in his income bracket. The retired pilot now makes over $250,000 a year in the private sector and is eager to do whatever he can to help put the nation back on track fiscally. The debt crisis impacts every American, and every American should contribute to the solution. We're all in this together. It is the wrong approach to put the entire burden on those struggling the most in the economic downturn, such as the middle class, the unemployed, or seniors. I urge the committee members to adopt a balanced approach to solving our fiscal crisis.
Has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tonight the President's going to be addressing this chamber, and the focus is going to be on jobs, and frankly, I hope that the President doesn't give us an instant replay of the first 2 years of his administration, where he tries to push more stimulus spending that didn't work, where he tries to push more bailouts to states that didn't work. What we need to focus on is common sense solutions that can bring us all together that will actually be proven to create jobs. If you look at some of the legislation we've already passed out of the House, just to get our people back to work, Exploring for American Energy could create over 250,000 jobs. There are free trade agreements for Panama, Colombia, and South Korea sitting on the President's desk. He's refused to act on. That would create over 350,000 American jobs. There's bill after bill, but there's regulation after regulation that are holding back our ability to create jobs as you talk to small business owners across the country. The President even acknowledged that when he rolled back the ozone standard, that EPA is out of control. We've got to roll back these crazy regulations that are killing jobs as well. That's the solution to this problem that will get our economy back on track. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Sunday marks the 10th anniversary of one of our nation's most tragic days. This weekend, we remember and honor those we lost and those they left behind. In the days and months following these attacks, our nation was in mourning. But there was also hope as we came together to build a stronger country. This anniversary let us reawaken that spirit. 10 years ago, we stood on the Capitol steps, Republicans and Democrats alike, in a show of national unity and resolve. The spirit of that moment was only a tiny symbolic action dwarfed by the enormous outpouring of kindness and volunteerism across this nation. But it is one we clearly need to see again. Let us once again channel the strength we found in the aftermath of 9/11 and begin a new chapter in rebuilding America. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
I ask to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as Hurricane Irene roared through the east, central New Jersey braced for the winds, and our towns and homes were battered by the winds and experienced even more damage from the water. Our thoughts and our efforts are with those people injured and harmed, and our heartfelt sympathy go to those who lost loved ones, including the family of Michael Kenwood, a rescue worker who died on duty. Now water today is coming back to exact further vengeance with even greater floods in some areas in New Jersey. Many are helping, including FEMA, yes, a government agency. Whether it is a natural disaster, a terrorist attack, or economic hardships, Americans pull together as a nation. It is unwise for anyone to suggest that people are on their own to deal with a natural disaster or to find work. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from New York rise? Gentlewoman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, our unemployed are hurting, and America's infrastructure is crumbling. It would seem morally indefensible and fiscally irresponsible not to take the opportunity to help solve one problem by addressing the other. The latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that 14 million Americans are looking for jobs, while the total number of job openings is just over 3 million. So if every single job was miraculously filled overnight, there would still be 11 million unemployed Americans looking for work and needing a job. And at the same time, all across America, there is work that urgently needs to be done. Our bridges, our roads, our schools, and other infrastructure are structurally deficient. The two most important responsibilities this Congress faces are keeping Americans safe and helping to create jobs. This is our chance to do both. Let's choose to build a stronger America through making it in America, building it in America, with American workers.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The American people sent us here to work together and are tired of the partisan bickering and the finger-pointing. I think it's very important tonight, as we listen to the President talk about creating jobs, that we work together to work with him. And I hope my Republican friends on the other side of the aisle don't summarily reject what the President is saying just to play politics. We need to create jobs in this country. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, many years ago, decided that in order to get America back to work, he would create infrastructure jobs from the government. I think that is something that we should do, and I hope the President mentions it tonight. We have crumbling roads, crumbling bridges, and all kinds of things that could put America back to work. Let's not have a repetition of what happened a month or so ago when Standard & Poor's downgraded the United States in terms of finances. Let's work together. Let's work with our President. Let's support him as he tries to create more jobs. Less finger-pointing, more working together. That's the American way. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Tonight, our President will speak to us in All-America and call on Congress to put America back to work and our economy back on a stronger track to recovery. House and Senate Democrats have kept up a steady drumbeat for jobs since we convened in January. As our Democratic leader says, it's as easy as ABC. Make it in America, build our infrastructure, and focus on community recovery, which so many parts of our country desperately need right now after tornadoes, storms, floods, and fires, with more storms to come. I support our President's call to action and ask all of my colleagues to do the same. But I also hope that we in Congress can make sure the jobs package we pass is big enough to do the job. We are where we are now because we listened to the deficit hawks and agreed to a Recovery Act that was not big enough to bring us out of the recession. Our constituents all over this country are hurting, and I really hope we can put aside partisanship and put them first. And we can get an important 2-4 because job creation is also deficit reduction. When we make sure our fellow Americans can take care of their families, we will also be making sure America can begin to take care of its debt. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio rise?
To address the House for 1 moment to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I spend a lot of time at home talking to my senior citizens. And on one of my visits home, they gave to me a package of 25,000 signatures asking if I would pledge to support Social Security. And I want them to know that I'm going to pledge to do that. But I also want to say to them that, yes, we need to make some changes, but it is not a Ponzi scheme. I want for them to understand those who get by, keep food and shelter because of Social Security, it is not a Ponzi scheme. Yes, we need to make some changes, but you know what, Mr. Speaker, we just need to raise the cap. We don't need to say that it can't be fixed, that it's broken. We need to raise the cap. And again, I'm going to say it is not a Ponzi scheme. It is something that hard-working Americans deserve when they have finally retired after working for 25 or 30 or 40 years. It is not a Ponzi scheme. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise? Without objection, the gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Before I begin, Mr. Speaker, I cannot help but acknowledge that we are just days away from memorializing those lost on 9/11. And I am reminded of that time some 10 years ago and how this body drew together. I don't know if our leadership has thought of it, but I think it would be more than appropriate if we went to the steps of the Capitol and sang again, "God Bless America." I hope we can do that, because when we did that together. Tonight, I hope we can be together as the President commands the attention of the American people. I hope we can be together to lift up the concept of make it in America, rebuild America, put our small businesses and inventors and geniuses back to work. I hope we can come together with the FAA authorization so Houston, Texas won't lose $90 million in airport construction. I hope we can come together and recognize that when we do a supplemental to help our friends with the wildfires in Texas, my constituents and others, and Lloyd Doggett's constituents, and all on the Northeast, that we are coming together to place jobs. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing more bipartisan than putting America back to work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Missouri rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask our friends in the majority to put their country ahead of their party and join us by enacting the Make It in America jobs agenda. Jobs is not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. Putting America back to work is what we all should be fighting for. When working families hurt, America hurts, and what elevates them lifts up the entire nation. We must pass without delay a reauthorization of the vital highway and transit bill. We need to enact Make It in America agenda to strengthen our manufacturing, technological, and industrial base. We need to build up America's infrastructure by putting people to work, rebuilding our roads, bridges, railway, ports, schools, and airports, and we need to speed disaster assistance to hard-hit communities without injecting partisan politics into the process. The time for political games is over, and the time for jobs is now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on September 8, 2011 at 9:27 a.m. that the Senate agreed to, without amendments, House Concurrent Resolution 74. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
Does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By direction of the House Republican Conference, I send to the desk a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 395, resolved that the following named member be and is hereby elected to the following standing committee of the House of Representatives. 1. Committee on Small Business, Mr. Schilling.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 392 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 70, House Resolution 392, resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 2218, to amend the charter school program under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Education and the Workforce. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Education and the Workforce now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in Part A of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2A. At any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 1892, to authorize appropriations for the fiscal year 2012 for intelligence and intelligence-related activities of the United States government, the Community Management Account, and the Central Intelligence Agency Retirement and Disability System, and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and amendments specified in this resolution and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. B. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence now printed in the bill, it shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of the Rules Committee print dated August 31, 2011. That amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against that amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. C. No amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text shall be in order except those printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution and amendments en bloc described in subsection F. D. Each amendment printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. E. All points of order against amendments printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules or amendments en bloc described in subsection F are waived. F. It shall be in order at any time for the Chair of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence or his designee to offer amendments en bloc consisting of amendments printed in Part B of the report of the Committee on Rules not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc offered pursuant to this subsection shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for 10 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the Chair and ranking minority member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. The original proponent of an amendment included in such amendments en bloc may insert a statement in the congressional record immediately before the disposition of the amendments en bloc. G. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill or to the amendment in the nature of a substitute made in order as original text. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 3. A motion to proceed with regard to a joint resolution of disapproval specified in subsection A1 of Section 3101A of Title 31 United States Code. A. Shall be in order only if offered by the majority leader or his designee, and B. May be offered even following the 6th day specified in subsection C3 of such section, but not later than the legislative date of September 14, 2011.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Fox, is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
House Resolution 392 provides for a structured rule providing for consideration of H.R. 2218, the Empowering Parents Through Quality Charter Schools Act, and H.R. 1892, the Fiscal Year 2012 Intelligence Authorization Act. My colleagues on the House Education and the Workforce Committee and I have been working to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. H.R. 2218, the Empowering Parents Through Quality Charter Schools, is just one of a series of bills the committee has considered this year. During committee consideration, this legislation received strong bipartisan support, including that of the committee's ranking Democrat member, George Miller. H.R. 2218 reauthorizes the charter school program and modernizes it by allowing the replication or expansion of high-quality charter schools in addition to the creation of new charter schools. The charter school program is important to ensure that parents and students have choice in education. With this bill, the House Education and the Workforce Committee has begun the bipartisan process of reauthorizing ESEA, and I urge my colleagues in the full House to support this rule in favor of the bill. The rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 1892, the Intelligence Authorization Act, for fiscal year 2012. Mr. Speaker, the intelligence community plays a vital role in our national security and defense. The bill was reported out of committee by a voice vote, and the committee has worked with the Senate to develop a bipartisan bicameral bill. Therefore, I urge my colleagues to support the bill. Under this rule, the Rules Committee has made it in order to consider 6 Democrat amendments and 3 Republican amendments to the Intelligence Authorization Bill. We've also made in order 5 Democrat amendments, 2 bipartisan amendments, and 1 Republican amendment to the Charter School Bill. I'm pleased to work with my colleagues on the Rules Committee to report rules for floor debate and the consideration of legislation that promote transparency and participation. And Mr. Speaker, I again urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this rule and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we will be discussing 2 good bills. Both bills under this rule are bipartisan bills. One will support students across this nation, give parents better choices, improve quality of our charter schools in our country. And so, too, we will improve and enhance the intelligence gathering of our nation that keeps us safe under the authorization bill. The Quality Charter School Act will improve our global economic standing by improving student access to quality and effective public charter schools. And I find, Mr. Speaker, sometimes it's necessary to help educate some of our colleagues on the definition of what charter schools are. Charter schools are established by school districts or other authorizers. They are public schools, have to accept all students equally. The concept of these schools is that they have site-based management. So again, it's a public school with site-based management. That in brief is the definition of a charter school. Now, that's not better or worse than a district running a school. It can be better, it can be worse. And as we look across the country, we see example of good charter schools and bad charter schools. Just because something is a charter school certainly doesn't mean it's good. What we strive to do with this bill is improve the quality of the authorizing practices of the states and the districts as they go into initially evaluating charter schools, making sure they serve at-risk students and show demonstrated success in closing the achievement gap, and two, make sure that they follow through on what their charter contains. A charter is a synonym for a contract. Effectively, these schools operate through contracts with public authorities, namely authorizers, states, state charter institutes, regions, school districts, and they're able to operate under those contracts and fulfill their role as public schools. What are charter schools not? And I sometimes hear from my colleagues, oh, is this corporate control of our schools? Is this some for-profit thing? No, it's actually irrelevant to that discussion, the discussion of charter schools. Sometimes for-profit companies are brought in as vendors to run schools. Now, this can happen with school districts just as surely as it can happen with charter schools. Some of the larger instances of this have been school districts because, of course, charter schools are much more mom and pop. But that is a separate discussion about what vendors can and cannot be brought in to actually run public schools. In the state of Colorado, as an example, we don't allow any for-profit institutions to hold the charter. Now, certainly we don't restrict charters for school districts, and they bring in a variety of vendors. I think every school district in the country uses private for-profit textbook vendors as an example. But we would be against managing out of D.C. what vendors they bring in. In fact, charter schools and school districts have great discretion about what vendors they use. But what this bill does is it effectively ups the ante on the accountability, the oversight, and also assisting with the growth of quality charter schools. Many charter schools across the country focus on particular areas of learning or emphasize particular aspects of curriculum. We have excellent art charter schools, college prep charter schools, Montessori charter schools, core knowledge, English language acquisition, outdoor learning and education charter schools. They can function more independently than a large district because they do have site-based management that allows for operational flexibility. They can have different school calendars, different school days, and different curriculum. This freedom allows the charters to function autonomously in areas that can benefit children's success in school. And again, with experimentation, not everything you try is going to work. And of course, for every example of a charter school that successfully serves at-risk kids, there are also counterexamples of charter schools that are doing as poorly or more so than some of the failing neighborhood schools that the children were in before. I have direct experience founding and running several charter schools in Colorado that filled particular education niches. I founded and served as superintendent of New America School when I saw that many school districts in my state were dropping funding for older students that were still learning English, and there weren't the types of programs that keep new immigrants in high school through a diploma. I approached several school districts about approving a charter school for this population, for 16 to 21-year-old English language learners. We were granted several charters. New America School now operates in Colorado and New Mexico and has served thousands of English language learners, helping them achieve a high school diploma through meeting their real-life needs. Again, what we really worked backwards from where the customers were. Why weren't these students in school in the first place? Many of them had real-life obstacles. They had day jobs, so they needed a night school. 40% of the young women had children, so they needed either on-site daycare or some sort of daycare voucher that we were able to help them supply. And just as importantly, we made sure that every member of the staff, the teachers at that school, every single one of them, is passionate about helping new immigrants learn English, and that is what brought them to our school and actually improved the faculty morale because they were able to practice their passion rather than it being an afterthought as it was in some of the other conventional schools. I also founded the Academy of Urban Learning, which is focused on educating homeless students in Denver. Right here in Washington, D.C., we've seen the success of several excellent charter schools that have outperformed other public schools, including the KIPP schools. So we've seen across this country, as a result of the charter school movement, great experimentation, some successes, some failures. It's time, 10 years on, to learn from our experiences with charter schools and replace the Federal Authorizing Act with one that can really up the ante, take the learning that's occurred over the last decade into account, and improve both the quality of charter schools generally and the quantity of good charter schools across our country. This bill would update the existing federal initiatives. We'd provide critical investment in quality alternatives. The bill carves out 15% of the funding for facilities, capital, and credit enhancement, and the remaining 80% would go to start new charter schools. The bill would require states to provide 90% of their grants to charter school authorizers and operators. It also incorporates much of the language from a bill that Mr. Paulson of Minnesota and I introduced last session and this session, the All-Star Act, which would add for the first time federal law, state-level funding for expansion of successful charter schools. So again, when we have examples of what works in public education, why not do more of it? Yes, we want to turn around failing schools. Yes, we need to improve upon what doesn't work. And yes, we need to hold charter schools that aren't working fully accountable under the law. But when we have an example of something that works, we should support serving more kids. As a simple example, in my state and district, the Ricardo Flores Magón Academy in Westminster is a K-8 charter school that opened just 4 years ago. And I'm glad, by the way, that one of the amendments made in order under this rule is an amendment from Mr. Paulson and I that would specify that schools that have 3 years of demonstrated success are eligible for expansion grants, because this school has only been around for 4 years. It has an extended year, extended day program, provides after-school tutoring, full-day kindergarten. Every student studies chess and tennis. And the student population maps to kind of a traditional at-risk population, 95% Latino, 86% English language learners, 93% free and reduced lunch. This means these are poor and working families. And yet, the Ricardo Flores Magón Academy has scored far above the state average. The state average, meaning including our wealthy suburban districts like some of the other areas that I represent, in the past 3 years. They've scored 95 to 100% proficient in math, between 77 and 97% proficient in reading and writing. And for 3rd and 5th graders, they've averaged 20% higher than the state averages. Other successful charter schools in Colorado, like the Denver School of Science and Technology, have also achieved positive outcomes with low-income students. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk about many of the amendments made in order under this bill. We did in the Rules Committee propose an open rule for these bills, and it would have been nice to have a more thorough discussion, which is why I will be opposing this rule. But I am glad it did make in order several amendments, including one of mine. Mr. Speaker, this rule also brings another very important bill to the floor, the Fiscal Year 2012 Intelligence Authorization Act. This bill continues the recent bipartisan tradition of passing authorization bills in order to reform and conduct oversight of our intelligence community. Every member of this body believes strongly in keeping our country safe. And when we're discussing the threats to our nation and the war on terror, the front line of that war is our intelligence gathering apparatus and our intelligence community. And in this time of budget constraint, we know we need to spend our money wisely. And I've often argued that instead of wasting hundreds of billions of dollars invading countries preemptively, we should use our force selectively, including targeted collection of intelligence about where threats arise. This bill makes a balanced compromise between budget realities and our national security needs. This authorization did find savings in various aspects of the intelligence community. It proposes to curb personnel growth while protecting our capabilities. While it invests in select high-priority needs, it also achieves savings by handling contractors similar to the way the President handles pay for civilian employees. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that this body was able to come together with both of the committees of jurisdiction, intelligence, and education and workforce around strong bipartisan compromise under these two bills. And while I wish we had the opportunity to more further discuss additional recommendations for amendments under the floor, I am appreciative that, in fact, there will be a robust discussion with regard to the charter school bill under this rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves the balance of his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the gentleman from Colorado for his support of the bill and support of the concept of charter schools, and congratulate him on his involvement and say that I think this is a great example of bipartisan cooperation, and will reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honor to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, a colleague of mine on the Rules Committee, Mr. McGovern.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I would like to talk just for a couple of minutes about a serious matter that relates to the intelligence bill that we will later consider. Mr. Speaker, for the past decade, Colombia's intelligence agency, the Department of Administrative Security, or the DAS, has engaged in illegal activities. Created to investigate organized crime, insurgents, and drug traffickers, the DAS instead provided paramilitary death squads with the names of trade unionists to be murdered and carried out illegal surveillance on journalists, human rights defenders, political opposition leaders, and Supreme Court judges. American cash, equipment, and training to help shut down drug trafficking may have been used for spy operations, smear campaigns, and threats against civil society leaders in Colombia. Several U.S. agencies aided the DAS: the State Department, Pentagon, DEA, CIA, and DIA, even as scandal after scandal after scandal became publicly known. It was only in April 2010 when U.S. Ambassador William Brownfield suspended U.S. aid to the DAS, diverting those resources to the Colombian National Police. Yesterday, Congresswoman Schakowsky and I sent a letter to the Secretaries of State and Defense, the U.S. Attorney General, and the CIA Director, asking them to provide Congress with a comprehensive report on all forms of U.S. aid to the DAS and to tell us what the DAS used the aid for. It's not too much to ask, Mr. Speaker. There has been a shocking lack of oversight over all the U.S. aid that poured into the DAS over the past decade. Getting to the bottom of this is what oversight is all about. Colombia appears to be doing its part. The Attorney General is carrying out an aggressive investigation and series of prosecutions. 6 former high-ranking intelligence officials have confessed to crimes. More than a dozen other operatives are on a trial, with more still under investigation. President Santos has promised to dismantle the DAS and replace it with a new intelligence agency. But in the meantime, the old structures still remain. Witnesses cooperating with the Attorney General find themselves and their families threatened, and human rights defenders, even now, are still under surveillance. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that U.S. intentions were good, but I also believe that the DAS was generally up to no good. I find it impossible to understand how the State Department and embassy officials can say with certainty that absolutely no U.S. aid funding was ever used by the DAS for criminal purposes. Congress must insist on safeguards to ensure that no funding, equipment, training, or intelligence sharing with any Colombian intelligence agency is used for illegal surveillance or criminal activities now and in the future. When I finish, if I can, the administration or Congress must prohibit any further funding for the... May I ask you additional 30 seconds?
I'll use additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
The administration or Congress must prohibit any further funding for the DAS, including aid in the pipeline, until the Attorney General has completed all investigations and prosecutions, finds out who ordered these illegal activities, and President Santos has completely dismantled the current agency. I ask the committee chairman and ranking member to guarantee the members of this House that no further aid will be provided to the DAS, and if that prohibition is not explicitly in this bill, that they will work with the Senate to include it in the final conference report. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have to yield to the gentleman.
My friend for yielding, and I just like...
The gentleman's time has expired.
The gentleman can continue on his own time if he cares.
I don't have any time. I'm just standing here asking...
The gentleman's time has expired.
To me, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't have any time. So
gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield such time as he may consume to the distinguished chairman of the Rules Committee, Mr. Dreyer.
The gentleman from California is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend for yielding, and I
didn't control the time. I was simply here as an observer, and I was going to begin by congratulating my friend on his very strong and passionate commitment and let him know that I share our desire to ensure that human rights are recognized in Colombia and any place in the world. I've worked with him in the past when he was a staff member, in fact, working for Mr. Moakley on this issue in El Salvador, and it is imperative that we resolve it and ensure that our tax dollars are not being used for any kind of nefarious purposes. Now, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I want to rise in strong support of this rule, and I do it because I think that it's been a long time since we've had the occurrence that we did yesterday in the House Rules Committee. We just came back, as we all know, from this 5-week district work period of August, and we had the first meeting of the Rules Committee. And in that meeting, we began with the chairman of the Education Force Committee, Mr. Klein, and the ranking member of that committee, Mr. Miller, and the chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Mr. Rogers, and the ranking member, Mr. Ruppersberger, come before the Rules Committee and offer bipartisan proposals on both charter schools, for the Education Committee, obviously, and the authorization bill from the Intelligence Committee. In fact, I quipped at one point during the Rules Committee that maybe we should have a 5-week break between each Rules Committee meeting so that we can, in fact, come together in a bipartisan way and deal with these critically important issues. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, it is a great day, especially as we prepare in just a little less than 7 hours to hear from the President of the United States on an issue that Democrats and Republicans alike say needs to be addressed. We all know, from having been in our states over the past 5 weeks, that job creation and economic growth are the top priorities for the American people. We all represent constituents who are hurting. I have friends who've lost their homes, their businesses, their jobs, and we want to make sure that we get our economy back on track. It's my hope that the example that we're going to have today, as we begin consideration of the charter schools bill, and then tomorrow as we deal with the intelligence bill, and obviously the bill that we're going to be considering today because of the President's speech tonight will have to carry on into next week, so we'll obviously have this continued bipartisan spirit on the issue of charter schools next week. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we're in a position where we can use these two as a model to address this issue of job creation and economic growth. Now, there's recognition that there are a wide range of views on the issue of job creation and economic growth. But I think that we were reminded by the Senate Minority Leader just today that the proverbial Einstein directive, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different outcome. I think that many of us, most all Republicans and some Democrats, have come to the conclusion that this notion of dramatically increasing spending, which is what we went through with the stimulus bill and several other issues, is not in fact the panacea that we have. And frankly, I don't believe that there is an absolute silver bullet. There is not an absolute panacea, but I do believe that we need to try to put into place an effort that will reduce the regulatory burden imposed on those who are seeking to create jobs in this country. And that's one of the proposals that we have. And again, I hope that we can work with the President on that issue. There's also been recognition that since the Japanese have reduced their top rate on job creators, we in the United States of America have the highest tax rate on job creators. It's the corporate tax rate of any country in the world. And now I realize that obviously we know there are corporations that through the tax structure that we have today don't pay that 35% rate. But I think that we need to make sure that we close loopholes and reduce that top rate. And I'm not the only one who has spoken in support of that. Former President Bill Clinton has spoken in support of that idea. President Barack Obama has spoken in support of that idea. And I know that as I look at my friends on the other side of the aisle at this moment, I'm looking at one who shares my view. I'm not going to name names, Mr. Speaker, but I'm looking at one who does share my view and another who might share my view as well on this issue. So there is a bipartisan consensus that if we can reduce that top rate on job creators, we have the potential to create jobs and also, and I know my friends on both sides of the aisle share this notion, generate an increase in the flow of revenues to the federal treasury, thereby dealing with this tremendous fiscal problem that we have. And we've got our Joint Select Committee that is going to be dealing with the issue of deficit reduction, and we know that economic growth would be the single best way to generate the revenues that we need to pay down the debt and deal with the overall fiscal challenges we have and have the resources necessary for the priorities that are out there. And another issue that, building on what was said by my friend from Worcester earlier, he mentioned the issue of Colombia. I happen to believe that if we look at the pending trade agreements that have been unfortunately languishing for 4 years, we need to make sure that we bring those forward. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that the President of the United States has indicated his willingness to do that. And I also want to congratulate Speaker Boehner and Leader Cantor for the letter that they sent to the President saying we want to find these areas of agreement. And the trade issue is one of them. I don't speak for every single Republican, but I speak for most all Republicans who believe very, very strongly that the notion of opening up new markets around the world for job creation and economic growth here in the United States, creating union and non-union jobs, union and non-union jobs is something that would take place if we were to pass the Korea, Colombia, and Panama agreements. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are many people who believe that somehow passing these agreements will open up a flood of foreign products coming into the United States, creating undermining the ability to create jobs here in the United States, when in fact the opposite will be the case. Because Korea, Colombia, and Panama today have, by and large, free access to the U.S. consumer market. That's a good thing. It's a good thing because it allows that single mother who's trying to make ends meet, going to Walmart or Kmart or Target or wherever, to buy products that are affordable. That's a positive thing. That's a good thing for our economy. What we need to do is we need to recognize that now we need to open up those markets so that, well, things come in from Korea and Colombia especially, and we need to do what we can to get into their markets. There are 40 million consumers in Colombia, and manufacturing jobs will be created here. Caterpillar, John Deere, Whirlpool, other great manufacturing companies here in the United States would have access to those markets. And on the Korea deal, Mr. Speaker, it will be the single largest bilateral free trade agreement in the history of the world, allowing us to have the ability to sell our automobiles and other products into the Korean market. And so this is an area where I believe that, again, recognizing that union and non-union jobs will be created here in the United States, that this can be an area of bipartisan agreement. And I know that the President will clearly talk about the imperative of these in the address he's going to be giving right behind me early this evening. And so what we're dealing with today, Mr. Speaker, is a very positive thing on the issue of charter schools. And I laud my friend from Colorado who's done such a great job in starting charter schools and improving charter schools. And I also want to comment on the statement that was made in the Rules Committee yesterday by the former chairman and now the ranking member of the Education Committee, Mr. Miller, who said that for many years he was a strong opponent of charter schools, and now for many years he's been a strong proponent of charter schools, recognizing that we can go through a learning process here. And I quipped that one of our former colleagues said that ours is one business where you can never admit to having learned anything. Because obviously, if you admit to having learned anything, you've flip-flopped. And the fact is, we all are learning, and we should be proud of the fact that we've learned. And I probably will hurt my friend Mr. Miller by praising him here, but I will say that the process that he's gone through on this issue of charter schools is something that I believe is a very, very good and positive thing. It's something that we all need to learn from, that experience that he had on the issue of charter schools, to be willing to listen to our colleagues on both sides of the aisle on a wide range of issues. And so that's why I think that this rule, enjoying bipartisan support, we've allowed many more Democratic amendments than Republican amendments in the rule itself. We're going to have a free-flowing debate on this issue, and then, of course, the very important intelligence authorization bill. And then tonight, I hope we can have, again, these areas of agreement so that we can get our fellow Americans who've been losing their homes, their businesses, and their jobs back on track. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.